You haven't got any papers for me to sign while I'm over here, do you?
I'll do it.
Being a JP? Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't, actually. Okay, so John, thank you for coming in to see me today. Before we start, I'm just going to run through some issues of confidentiality with you. First of all, everything you tell me in this counselling session is going to be confidential unless you tell me that somebody is at risk, somebody's in danger, or if you've committed a serious crime in which somebody is being hurt, if you're at risk of harm to yourself, and also if whatever is discussed here today is subpoenaed, and all my notes are subpoenaed, so there are some risks to confidentiality, okay? But apart from that, unless any of those things are reached, then everything is just kept in this room, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so while you're here, I'll just get you to sign this piece of paper just to say that you understand everything. Also, I'll tell you as well that at the end I'm going to give you a card with our website on it, and just if you have any questions about confidentiality, that should be able to answer all of your questions. Sorry, my pen isn't the greatest. Okay, so can you tell me I'll also tell you, I've got my writing pad here. I may have to take notes, just in case you're going to come back for future sessions, things that I might want to, issues that I might want to bring up with you again in the future. And at the end of the session, if you want to read any of my notes, that's absolutely fine, okay? So don't think I'm ignorant by writing in front of you. It's just things that I might want to come back to at a later stage. Okay, so can you tell me what's brought you in today?
Well, I've been retired 5 years now. I was an accountant.
Yeah.
Worked right up to the age of 60 or so. During my working life, I always found myself busy. I always found myself talking to people, not a huge amount, but you talk to clients and you talk to business associates and so on.
Yeah.
And I'm just finding that really after about 5 years of retirement that it hasn't quite been what I wanted it to be. It's been a very quiet time. It's been a very retiring time. It gives you probably too much time to think.
Yeah.
And often you start to think about sort of friends who have passed away or relatives who have moved away. So, at times you feel a little depressed.
Yeah. So, you've been retired 5 years, but when did you actually move to this area?
Been here now about 8 or 9 years. We moved up here just a couple of years before retirement to check it out and see if it would be a suitable place for retirement. So about 8 or 9 years.
And when you say we, is that just you and your wife, or
it's
are there
just,
children?
Just myself and my wife. Yeah, I mean that's another thing. All our children have left home. We're empty nesters.
Yeah.
And the difficulty with that is all 3 children, quite coincidentally with their families, have moved to North America. So the amount of domestic life that we can have with the kids is a little restricted.
So you've gone from a very full house to a very empty house.
That's exactly right.
And did it all happen around the same time?
The 2 elder girls moved out some time ago, let's say 10 to 12 years that they've been over in North America. But our youngest daughter, who is quite a gap there of about 7 years, is sort of quite a surprise.
Oh, really?
She met an American exchange student at university and is now getting married in America.
Wow.
So, it's sort of, although Sarah, the youngest one, did go to university, so she had been away for a few years before she met this chap as well.
Yeah. So you've been here about 8 or 9 years. What do you do in your spare time? Since you've retired, have you got any hobbies, or do you belong to any groups? Or?
Well, it's been difficult because on the occasional chances that we've travelled, it interrupts continuity in terms of other things. So what I've tended to be doing is doing a lot of reading. I do a lot of gardening. gardening. I spend a fair bit of time on the internet,
Yeah.
and I go for occasional walks.
Yeah.
I suppose that'd be the main sort
Yeah.
of things that
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just to recap on everything that you've said, you've been here for about 8 or 9 years, and you've retired in the last 5 years. And your 3 children have up and left the home.
That's right.
So you're at home alone with your wife, and you're finding it a little bit lonely.
Yeah, well, I think part of that too is because we moved so close to retirement.
Yeah.
We also moved away from a few friends that you've had for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's, if you don't have, as I do, we don't go out all that much, so I get to meet new people and have much of a chance to talk to them.
Yeah. So where did you move from?
Mainly, Sydney.
Yeah.
Sydney,
Yeah. So a
basically.
good distance. It's not really it's not where you can pop back to easily every weekend to catch up with friends.
That's right.
It's a bit of an effort, isn't it? And before you moved up here, what was your social life like?
Oh, look, I was working and always busy. I worked 5 full days and often, probably part of the weekend. So I didn't have a huge time, but we used to go out to theatre and shows, and we'd meet up occasionally with people for dinner.
Yeah.
But there seemed more to do in Sydney somehow.
Yeah.
Like you could, you could go for little drives and see different things. And so I wouldn't say our social life was full, but it was, adequate for the time. Yeah.
And now you're feeling a little bit depressed? A little bit depressed or a lot depressed, would you say?
Well, somewhere in between there. So, it varies, I mean, sometimes when you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, well, gee, what am I going to do today?
Yeah.
All the kids are overseas, and my family lives. Mum and dad have passed away just in the last few years, and my sisters live quite some way away. One lives in Canberra and one lives way up near Glen Innes, so I don't get to see them either. So you feel a little sort of lonely and isolated, I suppose.
And have you been able to express this to your wife?
I have, but she's happier than me because she's been able to make a few girlfriends and join a few things in the area, and while she's sympathetic, it's not as though that I can keep her to myself all the time and talk to her.
And have you ever expressed or experienced this before? When you're in your working life, did you ever get feelings of depression or?
No, not really. I mean, working life can be stressful, but it you didn't. I don't think you really had time to be, to be worried about your situation and worried about what you were going to do next. I was always busy and things to do.
Yeah. So when you wake up in the morning and you're feeling low because you don't really know what the rest of the day is going to bring or how you're going to fill the rest of the day, what sort of thoughts come to mind?
You wonder about the meaning of life, really. You wonder about what your role is, and I mean, the kids don't need you anymore, and my wife is, sort of relatively independent. She's a very nice person, and I can't relate to my family and that. So you sort of feel a bit lost and isolated, and not quite sure, whether you have much of a role left in life anymore.
Yeah. So that would tend to bring you down.
Oh, yeah, you do at times go to some fairly dark places. When I'm not working in the garden or reading and just sitting there and wondering about things. Yeah.
And do you have any strategies for yourself that you can?
I haven't really thought about. I mean, there's things that other people do, like play tennis or golf or that, but that doesn't particularly appeal to me. yeah, it's sort of, you know, living in a retirement town, there are a lot of people who are retired, so a lot of the voluntary work seems to be, you know, fill up with people and they
Yeah.
desperately. But I haven't looked terribly hard.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, you know, most of my time is taken up with reading and gardening, and that takes up a fair amount of time during the day.
So when you say that you wake up in the morning and you wonder how you're going to fill the rest of your day, and you worry about, you know, or you feel a little bit lost about all the people who have gone before you. Can you tell me more about those feelings that you have?
Yeah, well, just in the last year or so, I've lost my best mate.
Right.
He died of a heart attack.
Yeah.
And he's a sad loss, you know.
So you're grieving.
Yeah, he was a guy that you could ring on the phone and talk to, and you know, he was very big on films and movies, and so you could talk to him a lot about those sorts of things. So he's a big loss in my life. Yeah.
And you haven't really found anybody up here that you can share some of those experiences with? Oh,
well, you know, I'd say you make a lot of acquaintances, but very, very few friends. You know, like you have pleasant snippets of conversation with a few people. You know, like the guy down at the newsagent or people in the post office or whatever. But you never really have that feeling of ongoing friendship.
Yeah. And have you looked into any sort of groups that you can join in the area or that would interest you? Is there anything specific that you would like to do to get out and about and into?
I haven't really explored all the options. I've thought about the sporting things, but they don't really appeal. But no, I haven't really looked into, you know, what's available and you know, what groups or maybe learning opportunities are still available. I haven't sort of quite got around to that.
There are a few things in the area. There's a TAFE and there's there's a college in town, and we've got things like the men's shed. But are you a sort of a handyman or?
Not really. Not really a handyman, but you know, over the years you always do something around the house. So you know, you've tinkered a bit and fiddled a bit with things.
So overall, you've led a fairly quiet life since you've got here, and you've been keeping to yourself mainly.
Pretty much.
Just going for walks and doing gardening and reading.
That's right.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about any of the feelings that come over you when you're on your own?
Well, very occasionally when you're walking across a bridge or something like that, let's say a little footbridge or something like that, and you think to yourself, well, gee, you know, like if I took two steps in the wrong direction, that'd be, you know, the end of all my sort of anxieties and worries. You know, the same, you know, if you're walking around cliff tops and that, you know, the occasional thought comes to you, well, you know, if I was to pass away, then, you know, except for my wife, I suppose, but she's relatively independent, then, you know, I wouldn't really be missed, you know.
Really?
And, sometimes you walk down to the garage and you see the car there and you hear of people that do themselves in through carbon monoxide and that, and you think, well,
so
you could do it if you wanted to.
Yeah. So you do go to a very dark place at times.
Yeah, well, you do think about those things, yeah.
But you've never, you've managed to pull yourself back and keep on walking over that bridge or walking along the cliff. You've never gotten to that stage.
No, I haven't really threatened, you know, like got close to it, but I'd have to say the thoughts definitely crossed my mind.
Yeah, but the fact that you've kept walking is a very good sign that, you know, you do have a will to live. Have you ever thought about what would happen to your wife if you said she's pretty independent? Do you?
Yeah, well, she's independent financially because she, she'd be well looked after through my superannuation and other investments that we have. In some ways it'd be easier for her because she would then, I would think, probably move over to North America and link up with the girls and the family, whereas I'm sort of a little reluctant to do that. But she were by herself, I'm sure our daughters would be very keen for her to move closer. So I figured they'd look after her, if something were to happen to me.
Right. So this is quite serious. So I'll just tell you now before we move on that before you leave here today, I'm going to have to discuss this with my supervisor just to make sure that we have a plan of action for you.
Okay.
Do you have, when you're standing on the bridge looking over the edge of the bridge, do you have any worries about what would happen if you didn't end up dying? If you survived, have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a coward. You wouldn't want to.
I wouldn't say that.
You wouldn't want to permanently disable yourself and be in that sort of position. So I suppose that's one of the things that holds you back a little.
Yeah. And it seems to me as well that when you say your wife has the 3 girls and you're out here on your own, that you don't, at this point, you don't have a male counterpart, you feel a little bit outside of the 3 daughters and your wife?
Yeah, I think
maybe
that's true.
Maybe because they're all female and you're the man, or?
Well, I think that's true. The girls, or 2 of the 3 girls, have their little families now with young children. And
yeah.
Obviously, they have more in common with my wife, who spent a lot of the time bringing up the girls. So talking about bottle feeding and talking about nappies and
things like
clothes and activities. I mean, it's not really my sort of thing. And we didn't have any sons. We just had the 3 girls. And also, as I mentioned, with my best friend passing away,
you've lost that person to talk to.
Yeah, because we used to speak, not all that often, but about once every 3 or 4 weeks, and had a nice conversation. And he'd occasionally come up and visit us, and we'd go and visit them. So.
And what activities did you do with him? Was there any sports or watching sports, or just a few beers in the pub?
No, he was a movie buff.
Oh,
and so what we'd do, we'd go to his place and we'd watch. Well, the last time I saw him before he passed away, we were watching westerns, 1950s, 1960s westerns. He was explaining the careers of the actors and telling us something about the directors and so on. So it was a nice thing to do.
I think in light of everything that you've said, I think we've got a lot of issues to explore. So, and I am concerned about, these dark thoughts that you're having. So, I'd like to put in place a few things. It would be a contract for you to enter if you would be interested in. Just to say, first of all, I'll start by saying, let's bring you back in a few days instead of waiting for a week for your next appointment, okay? And I think there are some very deep issues that we have to explore, and I think one of them is loss and grieving for you, because I do think you're grieving your best friend, and that's natural. How long ago did he die?
A bit over a year.
So it's still fairly fresh.
Oh yeah, I think about him a lot.
Oh yeah, and did you know him for a very long time?
Yes, since about 1978, 79, about that time.
Yeah, so a very long time. So he's been a major part of your life, really. And so part of your life has vanished completely, hasn't it?
Indeed.
So how would you feel if we nominated somebody in your personal life right now that if you feel that you have these dark thoughts, you can say to this person, look, I'm going through this phase at the moment. If I call you, please answer the phone or just return my call as quickly as possible because I may not be okay. Is there somebody in your life that you could nominate?
Oh, probably well, it'd have to be somebody down in Sydney, I think, because I've still got a few contacts and a few guys that I knew through accounting in the firm.
Yeah.
And, you know, that I know them quite well and they know me quite well, so
Yeah.
that could work, yeah.
And also, I've got a few numbers here as well that you might be interested in. Lifeline, would you ever, if I wasn't available, you know, between the office hours of 9 to 5, and you got into a bit of strife, would you be interested in calling them just to speak to somebody and just, you know, say I'm going through this and just to get your thoughts and feelings together and just get whatever's on your chest off of it? So that would that be interesting?
Well, that seems like a reasonable idea. I could put the number on the fridge and
yeah.
if you know, maybe my wife might need to prompt me as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but if the number were there, it'd be
Yeah.
easier to call.
And how is your wife for talking to you? Is she a good support person?
Well, yes. I mean, we've been married a long time, but look, she's got the things that she does, and I've got the things that I do. Like she's, you know, she likes reading too, and she helps in the garden, but she crochets and she talks to the girls, and she has her little clubs and activities. She's a member of a couple of book clubs and social clubs and so on. So she's out and about a fair bit.
Yeah, yeah. But you'd still be able to say to her, hey, I'm not feeling great today.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah. I'll give you a list of numbers here, and there's also some support groups. But what I really want to do is, first of all, get you to sign this contract. So we've nominated a person. I really want you to be able to say to me is, if I experience these dark thoughts again, I'm not going to do anything until I speak to at least one person.
Okay.
So that might be your friend or your wife, or you can contact me, or even Lifeline. But just to buy you some time to get you over this, you know, dark area, and you know, basically just get through it. Because once you know.
Yeah, well, I did have a bloke, Bob Fraser, who.
Yeah.
He still works for the firm. He's
Yeah.
a couple of years younger than
Yeah.
me, but I knew him reasonably well, and so he could be a person that could sort of act in that way, I guess.
Okay. And also, in light of all this, I think instead of waiting for a week for your next counselling session, we might bring you in 2 days. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, do you have any health issues? You know, have you been struggling with health issues or?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, a lot of guys my age think about prostate cancer, and you know the expression the dad killer.
Oh yeah.
You know, and sort of sometimes that sort of expression reverberates in your mind a little, and so I get my little tests occasionally, and but my level is sort of a little bit above average.
Yeah.
So
that's been a worry for you as well.
Oh, it plays on your mind. It plays on your mind, you know. You start to think about those issues and things. So probably that's the major medical thing. I mean, I've had other things wrong with me, you know, like I've had a shoulder operation and whatever, but ongoing, that's probably the major concern.
I would be. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in going back to your GP and just expressing some of these dark feelings as well, because it might be beneficial if you started on some antidepressants for a little while, not necessarily for a long time, but I think there are some issues with grieving here that need to be worked through. But just because you're, you know, the fact that you have these very dark thoughts, we're taking it very seriously, and obviously we want to prevent you doing anything damaging to yourself. So I would advise you to go to your GP and see if antidepressants would be an option.
Yeah, well, he's a good bloke, so
Yeah.
I feel as though I could discuss that with him. Yeah, he's a
Okay.
good bloke.
Okay, so just to recap everything, after everything you've told me, so with these dark feelings, just the thoughts that you're having, you know, when you wake up in the morning and feeling that you need to focus on getting through the day, you know, that there hasn't been a lot happening, and with the loss of your friend, I want you to nominate the person you've mentioned, your friend down in Sydney, who you can ring up and
Well,
we'll just have a chat to him and say, listen, if I call you, please don't ignore my calls and get back to me if you can't get to the phone, because I might need, at some point, I might need someone to talk to.
okay.
We'll get you to sign this contract to say that you're not going to do anything until you speak to somebody first, be it Bob or your wife or Lifeline or myself.
Okay.
And we're going to get you in to see your GP to speak to him about these issues, and especially, well, with your prostate issues, just clear them up once and for all. That will give you a sense of relief
Yes, it would.
and take a load off your mind, and also just talk about the dark feelings, and maybe antidepressants might be appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll bring you back in 2 days and go through everything and try and focus on this grief
Okay. Well,
and do some grief counselling. How do you feel about all that?
no, well, thank you for that. I think that would be very, very helpful.
So I'll get you to sign this now, and I'll sign it also. And as I said before, I will need to speak to my supervisor just to make sure I'm doing the right thing by you.
Okay.
So before you leave, I'll just have a quick chat to my counsellor and see, or to my supervisor, and just see, is there anything else we can do to support you?
Sure, thank you.
And then that'll be it.
Okie doke.
Okay, thank you for coming in today.
Okay.